The 21st century is no doubt loaded with technological advancements which have made life easier and more comfortable. However, just as there are so many good aspects to the sophistication which comes with the times, so are there many social vices like drug abuse and trafficking. Sadly, many youths across the globe are engaged in drug abuse, with tens of millions suffering from drug use disorders. Only less than 1/5 of this number have been placed on treatment. As the world marks the 2023 International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking, today on Daybreak, we dedicate this day we dedicate this program on this issue. Now, taking a look at these vices, we have in the studio Dr. Hope Omeza, MD, CEO, Vagada Rehabilitation Center, Abuja. Welcome to the program. I hope I'm correct. Okay, well, apparently that will join us virtually and not here live in the studio. But we also have the president of the African Council on Narcotics, Rekpena Abasi. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
You're welcome. And also Barrister Chuks Akamadu, President Center for Ethical Rebirth among Nigerian Youths. Thank you so much for joining.
I'm pleased to be here, sir.
All right. Now, this is certainly a big issue, the issue of drug abuse in Nigeria. I'm not sure whether we can describe it as a pandemic yet, but the statistics are showing that 14% of our population are involved with the issue of substance and drug abuse. How bad is the situation, Mr. Bassi?
Well, you've just reeled out the statistics. Actually, over 14%, 14.4% based on the last survey. And this information is from the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime. And 14.4% is a huge number in relative terms. But if we even take that against the estimated current national population of the country, which is estimated to be about 230 million. So 14% of that will come to about 33,120,000, and this is persons between age 15 and 62. That's a huge number, because a number of countries are far less than this figure that I have mentioned. 33 million. Several countries in West Africa are not. If you take 1, 2, 3 or more countries, you probably won't even arrive at that figure. So it is huge, and these are estimates. The reality is that it is possible that more and more young persons, with falling ages, are getting involved in this unfortunate phenomenon almost on a daily basis, particularly in the tertiary institutions. And for a number of reasons. Some young men who leave their houses, who leave homes, when they get out there in school, they want to feel very free, they want to belong, and interact very well with their peers, and so they get involved. Some want to enhance performance in terms of academic performance. Some want to feel a sense of courage to be able to converse, participate in social interactions with their colleagues, and so they get involved. And some use it to enhance sex and even sporting performance. So it's a disturbing phenomenon, unfortunately. But we all have to express and not only get involved but show concern.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Chuks. Still, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes designated Nigeria as a transit route for many illegal substances. As he was talking, I was wondering why that was so. Why did we have that high number? Could that be a reason, or one of the reasons why we have that kind of number? The fact that Nigeria is a transit route for the illegal substances.
Well, if Nigeria was only a transit country for drug trafficking, then we wouldn't have had so much to bother about. Truth is that Nigeria is more than that. Our situation is worse than that, because we have inbound and outbound illicit substances available in Nigeria. We take out, we bring in.
And manufacture?
Yeah, of course, yes. And we consume too. And that's the most alarming part of it, that we are a consuming nation. We just talked about 14.4% prevalence of drug abuse in Nigeria. That's about thrice the global average. That should frighten every well-meaning Nigerian. It's thrice the global average. And it's a sad thing, but the good thing I must say is that the current leadership of NDLA has been able to unveil this calamity that is actually staring us in the face. Because before now it looked like all was well. But given the daily rates, the daily seizures, arrests, prosecutions, and convictions, we are beginning to realize the enormity of the problems that we've got on our hands, and we pray that as the days go by, Nigerians will begin to appreciate this as a national emergency and treat it as such, because this is one scourge that is actually eating deep into the fabric of the society. Because if you look at it, you'll find that it cuts across gender, it cuts across religion, it cuts across demography and all of that. As of 2018, there was a report that was released by Kaduna Neuropsychiatric Hospital that indicated that 6 million bottles of codeine expectorant were being sold on a daily basis in the Northwest alone. That's that's a staggering figure.
Yeah. Mr. Rekpena, let's talk about the approach that we are taking to deal with this issue. There was a revelation, I think, is it last year or a year before, when the arrest of Abakari happened, and that revelation by the NDLEA, which I believe the case is now in court and all. And people saw how state actors are actually involved, you know, in this, in the distribution chain. Talk to us about the network and the syndicate, and how, you know, best can we track, you know, the networks to deal with this issue.
Okay, well, just before I make some attempt to try to answer your question, I would like to chip in to add to the answer he had provided to her, you know, question about Nigeria being designated a transit corridor, and if that could have been one of the contributory factors to, you know, the prevalence in substance abuse in the country. And of course, he had, you know, aptly answered the question. Suffice it to add that a lot of the drugs are also produced in Nigeria. So the question is spot on. It's true. Quite a number of drugs that come in here don't go out, like heroin that comes from Southeast Asia, like cocaine, crack that come from the Americas, you know, places like Mexico, Brazil, and all of that, that come in here, are not able to be taken out because they come here and then get taken out, you know. So those that are left behind, of course, there has to be a market for them, and our own population, our own people, you know, consume those drugs, and they, of course, they have severe, you know, very chronic biopsychosocial effect on them. It's helping to also spread the problem of prevalence. But there are drugs that are produced here, like the one they call in the southeast Nkoromili. That's methamphetamine. It's produced here. All kinds of concoctions are used for it, and then several kinds of marijuana also produced here. Yeah, but the truth of the matter, in reflection of your question directly, is that you have, you know, valves and channels for trafficking across the world. You know, it's a big international syndicate that's involved in drug trafficking. It's a big web, a big network. Drugs that come in from cartels in Southeast Asia, drugs that come in from cartels in South America and elsewhere, find their way into this country through different kinds of channels.
Okay.
Human beings bring them in, and they use all kinds of concealment methods to bring them in, from vehicle parts to electronics and other kinds of concealment methods. Drugs come in and
But under the current administration, we have seen an upsurge in the arrest of people who bring in these drugs. Almost every weekend we see stories of large consignment of drugs have been intercepted and all of that. But that hasn't led to a reduction in the consumption of drugs in Nigeria, no?
You see, thank God for the current management of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, which has been up and doing, and that just tells you how very severe the problem had been before the present management that's been very hardworking to try to interdict, to arrest the various cartels. But it will also mean that before the this upsurging effort by the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, a lot of drugs already exist in the country. But remember also that I told you that quite a number of these drugs are also produced locally, and that has not affected, interdiction has so much not affected drug demand reduction. So demand reduction, consistently continues to grow and becomes higher and higher.
Sorry, I have to interject. Okay, we have to go to our guest, who is also joining us via Zoom, Dr. Hope Omeza, the MD/CEO of the Vanguard Against Drug Abuse Rehabilitation Center, Abuja. Thank you so much for staying, Dr. Hope. Can you talk to us about...
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. Give us your own assessment on how we are addressing the issue of drug abuse in Nigeria, looking at the statistics.
Good morning to my big brothers in the studio, Mr. Chooks, and the wonderful hosts. Good morning, and good morning to all Nigerians. This is a matter of huge importance, considering that Nigeria has transited from not just being a transit country to now a manufacturing country, and at the same time a consuming country. Many years ago, there were some classification of drugs of abuse, which were classified as just being transited via our ports, via our states, but there were no consumers, there were no manufacturing capacity for those drugs. But as of today, the NDLA has uncovered several clandestine laboratories in the southeast and even south. And the other person in the studio have just mentioned to us that some of these drugs are also cultivated. For example, marijuana. I remember some years ago, my organization took to research in secondary schools and discovered that apart from the conventional drugs of abuse, our young people from the age of 9, 10, 11 and above have taken to innovative methods of getting high on substances without leaving the four walls of their homes. These were able to distill in some trainings to women and parents as well as leaders on uncovering some of these methods that some of their children may have taken to under their nose, and then how to respond to those issues and how to aid coping strategies for young individuals. So indeed, is a tough one, but like Mr. Chooks rightly said, we have a round peg now in a round hole, especially in the leadership of the NDLA currently. But what I want to say is that, we must also pay much attention to drug demand reduction, because my sister in the studio has just asked us that what is happening despite the incessant seizures of drugs every day by the NDLA, why is drug abuse still on the rise? And this takes me back to my positions several years ago, that the government must begin to pay huge attention So drug demand reduction. Yes, I understand. The NDLA, for example, have a department called the Department for Drug Demand Reduction and a directorate in that agency. However, much work still needs to be done with that regard. What does drug demand reduction mean? It simply means reducing the demand by the consumers. So, and this takes us to more evidence-based awareness program to help reduce the demand for these drugs. By the time individuals are more educated about the effect of drugs for the various age group affected by these drugs, when they are more educated on those things, they have more knowledge, they are able to take informed decision. And you see, at every time you have a program on drug abuse, you are discussing with three audiences. One of the audience are those who have never used drug before. The second audience are those who are planning to use drug or about to use drug. The third audience are those who are already using the drug. So whenever we now give this information out through several fora, you are able to delay or even completely prevent the possibility of those who are about to use the drug, prevent them from ever using it. That is one. Now, and I always give this analogy, no matter how lucrative, prospective a business plan is or a business industry is a supplier or a businessman will not go into that business if there is no demand for that business. Because you know that if you get that business, you are so interested, you have passion for that business. If you get into the business, there will be no buyers or the demand is on the low. You won't go into it. For some of us, before we start businesses, we look at the statistics. What has the demand been in the UK, in the US, who have enough elaborate data, and they look at, okay, are there local data to compensate what we are getting from outside the country? Are these products in high demand? Is the demand growing or is the demand on the low? So these are the things that the suppliers too are looking at. As far as the demand for drugs are still high, evidenced by people available and are in need of these drugs because they lack knowledge, they lack understanding, there's no awareness on these things, then there will be problems. Then the next area of demand reduction is treatment. Those who are already using the drugs, there should be availability of treatment centers to treat them. That again takes us to one of the theme of this year's International Day, which is to stop stigma. Now, people who use drugs are being heavily stigmatized. When they have the information to where they can get help from, they don't go to get help because the picture that people who suffer from drug use disorder have more than the rest of that. Even family stigmatize them. Even healthcare professionals stigmatize those who use drugs. So you see, this thing need to be worked upon extensively so that people are willing to come in for treatment. And then when they are willing, do we have enough treatment centers for this? I also know that the NDLA are laying foundations for rehabilitation centers across the socio-political zone, which is a good one for this administration. But however, I think that more needs to be done with respect to drug demand reduction so that as the NDLA are seizing, reducing supply, we also need to reduce, because once there is demand, the suppliers will go to any length to make it available because they know that there is demand for it. And so the problems portended by drug abuse will be more escalated. How? Somebody who is addicted is addicted. If you reduce supply and then there is demand, he will go at any length, even if it means stealing or selling off properties, selling off his phones or whatever he's able to sell, or even commit crimes just to get the money to procure the drug he's addicted to. And so all the suppliers will do is to increase the cost of their products because there is still demand for it. And the demand will come for it, doctor, and they get more richer.
Okay, doctor.
They get richer, with all of this.
We will come back to you shortly, doctor, just for you to give us ideas on some of the new ways that has been, I would say creatively by some Nigerians to come up with ways of hiding themselves and all that. But for now, let's get back to the studio.
Okay, Mr. Chooks, when he was talking, he mentioned age group, and then I had 9 years old. Now, it appears that we have a fundamental problem. Why would someone who is 9 years of age want to take drugs? So I'd like you to take us through it. Based on your activities so far, what are the reasons why more Nigerians are considering drugs? Not too long ago, there was a story where about 50 people were hospitalized because they attended a wedding and the tea was mixed with a substance, you know.
Well, you're very correct. You're very correct to the extent that truth is, drug abuse has become a fad. It's become fashionable amongst young people. Truth is, quite a number of them that get involved in drug abuse do so not because they desire it, but just because amongst their peers, abusing drug has suddenly become a future that validates one. So you now find these young people trying to validate themselves by doing the wrong things. Why? Because quite a growing number of their peers now do it. So you're like, oh, this is fashionable. You know, when something is fashionable, you don't really sit down to begin to determine the pros and cons, whether it's in your best interest or it will be injurious to you. You just go into it because it's fashionable, and that is the danger in this whole thing.
Mr. Chooks, what then do we say about parents who actually influence their children into taking drugs? We've seen several videos on social media, for instance, about how parents will encourage their children to take alcohol and other things like that.
Well, the failure of parenting, again, is another factor that is fueling this drug abuse scourge in the country. But it does not detract from the fact that peer pressure also plays a role. Then, if you look at it from a broader perspective, you really find that we are in danger, in very serious danger, because the home that is supposed to serve as succor, your immediate family that is supposed to restrain you from getting involved in such vices, would even predispose you to getting involved into what would eventually hurt you, hurt your physical well-being, bring strain in the family, make our security vulnerable, because this whole thing is not just about the physical well-being that is affected when they involve. Of course, it affects the person's mental capacity. You are not able to function optimally again as a human being. If you're a worker, of course it affects your productivity at work. Then besides that, again, of course, is this consumption of these illicit substances that fuels insecurity in the country.
Is the social media playing any role?
Exactly. Oh, yes. You see, that's one. Well, I've had occasion in the past to do a piece that was published by this day newspaper where I said, man, I don't understand what the National Film and Video Censors Board is doing. I also don't understand what the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation Commission is doing, because the laws are there. They are supposed to censor this music video content before they are put out for public consumption. Why would you be, harassing the public with content in our music videos that promote intake of alcohol, excessive use of alcohol, and then abuse of narcotic substances? And then we watch and nobody's raising an eyebrow, and we're like, come on, I don't understand it. Has this eventually been accepted as part of our culture? No, it is a contra culture. All of us must stand up to it. It is a contra culture that is planning, that has come in quite alright, but we must find a way of expelling it. National Film and Video Censors Board should rise up and be alive to its responsibilities. Same for Nigerian Broadcasting Commission. What are they doing? Are there no laws? Of course, there are body of laws that prohibit these things. Why are they allowing this? Why are they allowing these artists to get away with this?
Okay, Mr.
Redpen, this social media problem.
Yes, you talk about the social media, but I want to add to that that should we consider criminalizing, or perhaps if there are legislations at the moment, criminalizing parents who encourage their wards or children into taking substances?
It's going to be very difficult to do that, because that means that you would have to have the wherewithal spread across the country to, uncover such parents and then deal with them within the limits of the law, as you are suggesting. But the social media problem is a major factor. Why? Because beyond the institutions within the country that have responsibility for censorship of such material in the media, young children have access to other sources of information in the social media. I mean, most parents would buy phones for their kids who are 8 years old, 6 years old, 9 years old, and then provide them data and access to the means to, watch material that come from, or items that come from any part of the world. That's how bad it is. So whilst we may be able to perhaps put in place measures locally to try to contain that, it's also a very difficult thing going beyond this country. Now, what was the question again?
Yes, talking about criminalizing.
Oh yeah, I said that was going to be
the role of
that would be a little bit difficult.
It will be difficult, but I think it's desirable at this point. Yeah. It's desirable because I do not see the justification for an adult to give a child, an infant, someone who is still a minor, such negative exposure. Come on, we owe it a sacred duty to ensure that our young ones are protected from this kind of vices, because you're eventually destroying the future of that person. You've had your own time. I don't think it's morally justifiable for you to now refuse to give your child the opportunity to choose between good and evil. You now decide to okay, what I'll do, I'll make sure I'll encourage my child to be on the negative path. That is not good.
No, but it is not only that some parents encourage their children to do drugs, but the children are very observant. They see their parents doing drugs, and so they think it's a good thing.
But no, they're interrelated.
Sorry, but there's also the problem of pre-genetic disposition. If, according to survey, you had parents who were involved in substance abuse, there's the tendency that one of their kids at some point would also be involved. But how do you deal with the situation where these kids pick up these habits in schools from other kids? So it's a difficult problem, but of course we would be at it.
At the family level, sir. Like I said, I think it should be a sacred duty that a parent owes his or her child. If you are abusing drugs...
But what if that parent is abusing the drugs?
That's what I'm saying. If you are abusing the drug, you know you're doing the wrong thing because you are an adult. I am saying that you should have the presence of mind to shield that your child from that act of yours. Because, making that child, giving the child that exposure, and then, why would you be tempting your child by doing that? Your child will eventually copy what you're doing because your daddy and your mommy, and everything daddy does and everything mommy does is very desirable and acceptable in the eye of every child. So why would you do that? That's what I'm saying. If there is a legislation tomorrow, a proposal for such legislation, be certain that I will back it. My organization will back it, because you cannot abdicate your responsibility as a child and then you, as a parent, and then you endanger the life and the future of your child. What kind of parenting then are we doing?
All right. Well, Dr. Hope, if you can talk to us about this, if you like, you could also chip in on this. But what are some of the new ways that have been evolved by, substance abusers to get high?
Yeah, interestingly, I don't like to delve into some of these new ways on a platform like this, because I know that there are divergent audience. And then again, some young people may be listening or watching this, and that might, trigger their curiosity. All right. So, but like I said, we would rather love to engage parents and, of course, leaders, religious leaders, traditional leaders on some of these new innovative means of getting high by young people, to further enhance their capacity in training and upbringing. Yeah, but not in a platform where we have divergent audience like this. Now, but to respond to an issue raised about fundamental problem with young people.
Doctor.
Indeed.
Yes, I get.
Yes, can you hear me?
I get the sensitivity of it, but we also will want our parents who are watching us to also be aware of some of these things that their children do that they do not know, that they are not aware of. But maybe you can find
true.
a creative way of doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand, but then again, I don't think we have a means of stopping the young people from listening to this. So that's why I'm concerned about having to mention some of those things. If you permit me, I don't think it would be good to mention it to the other participants of this program, which we don't have a control over, you know.
That's fine. Go ahead.
All right then. So in terms of our young people having fundamental problem, indeed, there is no overemphasizing of this matter. Young people today are more exposed than the older generation. A 5-year-old boy today probably knows more than a 50-year-old person knew when he was 20 years because of the avalanche, because of the generosity of information through several media today. So when I was 10 years of age, I probably didn't have a phone, but now a 10-year, in fact, a 5-year-old person has a tablet. And, some of us didn't have the opportunity to watch cartoons. And today, young people are watching cartoons that are not supervised by parents. And they seem to copy some of these behaviors. Now, to talk about, we also seem to neglect the psychological need of young people. We just think that everything they do is just out of tantrum, they will outgrow it, but attention needs to be paid to the emotions, the feelings, and the psychological need of young people. There's a field in psychology, pediatric psychology. There are actually specialists and experts for this. Now, so parents should begin to pay closer observation to their children. And then because if you don't do that, and they don't also come to you to talk to you about some of the issues that bother them, they will discuss with friends who will either lie to them or betray them. I've been to several programs to educate young people. And if you see the questions, the revelations they make to me, how friends have told them already at the age of 8 years that if you take this particular substance, you will forget your pains. If you take this particular substance, you forget your trouble. Now, some of our children sometimes may not do well in school, and this affects them. Indeed, it affects them. Sometimes friends body shame them and say hurtful words to them. It affects their mind. It affects their feelings and emotions. And so they have also friends who will tell them, take this particular substance, you'll be fine. In fact, one has told me that a friend told him, if you take this particular drug, you will not get addicted to it as far as you're not taking overdose. Okay. Now, all these are myths that was debunked in that program. Now, in America, the drug agency, the anti-drug agency in America, has one of their goals to research into biological factors causing drug use disorder. We may not have that for our NDLA as part of their thematic area, but it's important, as you said, that genetic predisposition play a key factor. I've had patients who had parents who were drug users, and they were going in that path. So it's important. It has been verified. It has been well researched that the role of biological factors and genetic factors play a key role. However, as we are talking about prevention, according to Mr. Chooks again, if people who have genetic predisposition to a particular problem never get exposed to it, that characteristics may never be expressed. So that is why primordial mode of prevention need to be instituted, like Mr. Chooks is saying. Some people may want to argue against that and say, okay, is that not hypocrisy? Won't they still get to see it later? But then their brain would have been more matured at that point. You'd have delayed, like I said earlier, would have delayed their contact with this, and then they would have been more matured in terms of their mental capacity, in terms of emotion, in terms of feelings, and how to handle problems and solve life issues. Okay. So you see, this is important that the government must begin to pay. This is under drug demand reduction, not supply reduction now, not seizures of hard drugs and the rest now, but demand reduction. So programs are targeted at children, at pregnant women, at mothers, at leaders at several capacity to enlighten them on all of these things. So this I think I should stop here. All
right, thank you so much, Dr. Hope Omeza, MDCO of Agada Rehabilitation Center, Abuja. We thank you for joining us on Daybreak, and also for our guest in the studio, Mr. Barrister Chooks Akamadu, who is the President, Center for Ethical Rebirth among Nigerian Youths, and also Rekpene Bassi. He is the President of the African Council on Narcotics. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Day.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.